All right. What is Canadian football?
So it's like football in America, not
I would
soccer,
imagine by the name.
but it's like American football, but in the same way that Canada is kind of like a bizarro US, it's like a bizarro version of American football. So you have three downs instead of four downs to get your 10 yards. And
Because why not?
the field is 110 yards instead of 100 yards. I'm guessing this had to do with some kind of metric conversion gone horribly awry, but and there's 12 players instead of 11 players. The receivers, they can run before the ball, like kind of like arena football. And so they've made these changes. Then there's sort of like slight tweaks to that. So like since there's only three downs to get your 10 yards, they make the defense start 1 yard back behind the ball. And there's no fair catches. There's no touchbacks. If you do a touchback, you actually give the other team 1 point. It's a special scoring play called the Rouge. It's French because there's the one province in Canada that's French, and so they sort of drag everyone along. And if you ever watch a game featuring the team from Montreal, they have to have the refs do everything in French, first, and then say it in English. But
Of course.
now you'd be very surprised to learn, I think, that the Canadian Football League is actually older than the National Football League. So it is not that they did everything wrong; they just happened to have things slightly off.
Wait, so hold on. Okay. 110 yards, or do they measure it in meters and just
No,
for
it's
some
it's
Americans?
yards.
It's yards.
It's yards. Yeah.
Okay.
So in the NFL, they have the 50-yard line at the center,
Yeah.
and the CFL, they have the 55-yard line. With all these changes, though, it's surprising how close the game is. Where in NFL, if you're like a receiver and you have like 100 yards and a touchdown, like that's a good performance. Or if you're a running back getting 100 yards rushing, or if you're a quarterback getting 300 yards passing, and it translates almost exactly, statistically, to the Canadian Football League.
Can you watch this in America?
Oh yeah, So until last year, all the games were on ESPN Plus, which is where ESPN throws all the stuff that it doesn't put on the main channels.
Basically, the ESPN 8 the Ocho. Yeah.
Yes,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay.
Now you can watch it on CBS Sports, and the CFL themselves are trying to build their own streaming platform called CFL Plus, where
Who
you can watch
isn't
it.
trying to build their own streaming platform at this point? Like,
I don't know, but lots of people should not.
yeah, agreed. It's rough.
The interesting part about this is like usually when people are in America, it's content like geo restrictions are sort of flipped, where it's like, oh, someone from like Australia wants to watch this like US show, but it's not available because the rights and all that. But here it's like, in Canada, like you can watch it like on over the air antenna TV, but like in the US you have to like have this special like app subscription to get it. It's very, very complicated to watch, but I do watch nearly every game. I actually play fantasy football for Canadian Football League, not for the NFL.
I was going to ask if they have fantasy Canadian football, and you just answered it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually it's kind of like a little side hustle that I have. I play on DraftKings, where you can play for money, and so over the past the past 4 years, I think I've won like around $25,000 playing fantasy Canadian football, which is more than most people's fledgling build in public indie hacker projects. So I think it's been a good use of my time.
I mean, do people take it as seriously as American football, fantasy American football? Jesus.
Yeah, everything is just like a smaller scale. And that's like why I got into it at the beginning, because I liked playing NFL fantasy football, but there's just so many people that there's not really like any edge to be gained from anything. 'Cause like there's hundreds of sites that will give you like very extreme, like cutting edge, like analysis and statistical modeling and projections and all this stuff. But like for the Canadian Football League, there was nothing. So the first season, I basically built like a crappy version of all these tools on my own, because the Canadian Football League had their own API that they could use. You could get all the data from. So that was kind of how it started. And I had like this suite of little homegrown tools that was like, oh, no one else has these. So everything is the exact same. It's just like a smaller scale. So like if you play fantasy football on these like pay to play sites, it's like you can win like $1 million every week if you win like the big jackpot, and like there's hundreds of thousands of people entering, whereas in the Canadian Football League there's probably like 100 people entering and you can win $1,000 if you come in first place. But I think it's a lot easier to like get into the 1% of like CFL fantasy players because there's so few of them.
Right. Jeez. I thought you were making a joke when you're like, I can talk about Canadian football. It's like, that's not a thing. You're talking about rugby. No, it's a thing.
Nope.
Today I learned about fucking Canadian football, because why not?
Yeah. You would probably be surprised to learn that in the past there have been teams from America that actually were in the Canadian Football League.
I would be very surprised to hear that. Like teams that I've heard of, or like
but there was like there was a CFL team in like Las Vegas, and so it was like it's like 8 Canadian teams and then like one from like Las Vegas.
It's like the reverse of MLB, where you've got a bazillion American teams and then like what, is there 2 Canadian teams still, or is it only the Blue Jays?
I'm not sure.
Expo's still a thing?
I don't think so. Know. I think Toronto is the only one, maybe.
Okay. Right.
But yeah, it's interesting, and the Canadian Football League too. There's also a requirement that a certain number of the players have to be Canadian citizens.
Really?
If you're an actual like naturalized or born Canadian citizen, like, and you go and play like Division I football, but you don't make it to the NFL, like you're of extreme value to Canadian football teams, because that means they can use an American in another spot.
Huh. That's an interesting rule. They don't have that rule in hockey, although no, I feel like they wouldn't need that rule in hockey, because I feel like it's almost the reverse rule. Like, you need to have an American on your team would be the hard thing to do.
It always struck me as weird, because it does seem to be a case where people seem to be happy with like restricting things based on like your like national origin, wherein lots of other things it's like, we don't want to be doing that.
Yeah. Oh man. So how the Red Wings looking for next season? Still horrible, or having a good off season?
See, I have the problem of when I was born in Michigan, so I've been like a Red Wings fan, and my dad was a big Red Wings fan, and he watches, he gets the Sunday ticket package or whatever, and he watches every game, and they lose quite a bit, so that's an exercise in frustration. But growing up, like I followed the Red Wings, and during when I was like elementary school age or like middle school age was like kind of in like the heyday of the dynasty of Detroit, when they were winning multiple Stanley Cups and trouncing your Philadelphia Flyers quite handily, a 4-0 sweep if I recall.
It's that that's not even that bad. Like, that's just
at least they made it to the championship. Yeah, that's nothing to scoff at.
I'd love to get swept in the playoffs, because it means we made it to the playoffs. That's not going to happen for a couple of years.
There's kind of like the 90s era Red Wings, and there was like the Red Wings Avalanche, blood feud, which was great, great as a fan to watch. And then, then they were bad for a bit, and then they kind of had the second wave with Zetterberg and Datsuk, and sort of winning another cup in the early 2000s and getting back. And then they've just been sort of terrible for quite a long time, but we are trusting the process. We are following the Iser plan, and things are looking up for Detroit. I think they're going to be competing for a playoff spot this next year, and we'll see. Maybe it'll be worth watching all the games.
I will say, where you see a lot of crap teams and you just watch one of their home games and you see so many empty seats, and you're like, yep, it's because you guys stink. I didn't, like, at least not to the same level, saw that with Detroit. Your fans are like diehard. Doesn't matter how bad the team's doing, like, people are still going, people still have their season tickets. Like,
we have that problem. So I live in Indianapolis, and so we have that that problem with the Pacers, the NBA team here, where they're never going to attract like top players, and the management is not willing to like spend exorbitantly. So they're basically just sort of there to arbitrage the like collective bargaining power of the league, where like as long as you field a team, like you get like your cut of the revenue. And so, you know, the team will never be good and never be bad, and it's kind of you're in purgatory with the team.
Yeah.
I'm very drawn to the like extreme outlier strategies and in sports too, because I think it's just more interesting, whether that's like we're gonna like tank and intentionally be bad and then like collect all these assets and try and flip them around, you know, or like we're gonna try some wacky strategy. I wish more teams that were like stuck in that middle would try that, of like, you know, because it can work out. You've seen that with like the Golden State Warriors, where they're like, we're gonna just like only shoot threes and only draft players that are like good at shooting threes, and then like it sort of worked out for them, and that was like where the league was going. But then you have these other sports where it's like we don't have the money or the talent to compete, but we're gonna play the same game and use the same strategies as the other teams, and it's just never gonna work.
Yeah. It also is weird in hockey because you can lose on purpose, almost be the worst team in the league and not even be guaranteed that good of a draft pick.
Yeah,
because you got the draft lottery.
In hockey as well, like it's rare that top draft picks outside of the top three, I would say, like actually come in and make an impact and even play right away. Like,
yeah,
lots of players go into development for several years, or like, we're drafting this like 18-year-old and he's going to play in, you know, the Swedish Pro League for, you know, 2 years before he comes up and plays in the minor leagues. It's kind of like baseball, I think, in that way, where there's, you know, the number one overall pick like has a chance to play, but everybody else, you know, is not. Whereas, you know, sports like the basketball or football, it's like your draft picks are like expected to, if not start, but at least make, you know, contributions to the team early on.
Yeah, I definitely agree that there's a development cycle for your draft picks in hockey, but I will have to disagree on the outside of the top three or so. Like, there's been some deep draft picks that ended up being amazing hockey players, and it happens, I feel like, more than in other sports, where it's like, some of the other sports, you're just like, if you're not a first round pick, you're just a bench warmer. But in hockey, there have been people drafted in later rounds that are, I think Mark Stone was round 5 even.
Detroit has a long history of this as well. But it's just more that they don't come in immediately. So it's not like you can like lose for one season, be terrible, and then like sort of spring back. It's like you will probably be bad for a few years, and then it will take a few years of you being bad and drafting and developing players correctly.
Right. Developing players correctly is definitely a problem that the Flyers have had. I will say that. So, Canadian football, a little bit of hockey. What else we got? What's our other random topic to fill our bonus episode with?
Do you ever play pickleball?
Dude, no. But so this is, I don't keep up on the new cool things, obviously, but I thought pickleball was like an old person sport. I thought it was a way to trick old people into playing a sport and being physically active. I have so many friends that are like limping around. I'm like, what happened to you? They're like, I tweaked my calf playing pickleball. Ernesto came to a Philly RB joint meetup that we had in person. He limps into the room. I'm like, dude, what happened to you? And Ernesto's not that old. And he's like, I hurt myself playing pickleball. I'm like, okay, number one, you're too young to play pickleball, in my head at least. And number two, I thought it was for old people. How do you get hurt playing this old people sport?
Yeah, I mean, so it basically is like tennis with less running, which, you know, is good for, you know, if you have bad knees or you know, don't want to run like 5 miles to, you know, hit the ball back and forth. But what's happening now in pickleball is like it's a good like middle ground sport of like, there's a much lower barrier to entry than tennis. Like, you don't have to have like a $200 a racket or like a membership to a club to play, and it's like there's kind of a social aspect to it. So I think that's, more people are getting into it for that. But it's a little bit more. You do get like more exercise than ping pong. So it's sort of table tennis. Ping pong is a brand. Table tennis is the sport. It's kind of in the middle. So then I think you also have lots of people that are not working in an office playing table tennis that are looking for something like that. Pickleball's fitting in that way. Then you've got pressure from both sides, and it's a lot of fun. But what you see happening in the pro, there's now these startup pro pickleball leagues. Oh yeah, there's multiple competing leagues. So they're still trying to hash out whether it's going to be like a team franchise-based model, or is it going to be an individual model.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, with anything, it's like there's a business to it, right? And so sports are like one of the few industries where there's like legalized monopolies, basically. So if you can sort of cash in on this, you can have like the next UFC if you like get the right pickleball league, and pickleball becomes so popular. So there's lots of money flowing in. But what happens is these like the people that play professional tennis that are sort of outside the top like 30 of pro tennis are realizing that they can like grind it out to like be the number like 84 ranked men's tennis player, or you could go play pickleball and be like the number 2 ranked tennis or number 2 ranked pickleball player. And there's a lot of money flowing in right now. So that's what you're seeing in kind of pickleball, is that there's a lot of tennis pros, or like, I was a Division I college tennis player, but I don't have any aspiration of joining the pro tennis circuit, but I can like join the pro pickleball circuit and get a paddle sponsor and be off to the races. So it's really just about finding your niche, right? Like I would be like the number 100th best, JavaScript dev influencer, but I can be like the number, 3 top Rails influencer.
Oh, dude, you're right. That's actually a good point. Jason Sweat has talked about that before. Like, you got to find your niche. You can't be the number 1 Rails developer per se, but he was like, I'll be the number 1 Rails testing guy.
Exactly.
So like, actually that's a good point. You could probably be like a huge COBOL influencer, because like no one's
making videos about it.
No one's making videos, and it was in high demand during the pandemic. It was big. It made a thing. Although arrays start at 1, so I don't know how much you want to get into that.
Yeah. I don't know about COBOL as a as a prospect, but
there are dozens of us.
The other thing that's interesting in that space is like all these people now they're doing like React videos, but of like programming blogs, and I just think it's like the weirdest crossover. So there'll be people that's like, I'm like a dev influencer, and it's like I'm reacting to like this blog post by like DHH, and so they just like they've got like their live stream, and they pull up their like face cam, and then they've got the monitor next to them that's got like DHH's blog post about why you don't need foreign keys or whatever, and so then there's just like this like Rust developer who's just like reading it and like stopping every like sentence to be like, yeah, I agree, or like, no, this is completely wrong, and we're living in strange times.
That is definitely strange. I caught my daughter. This is not going to be as bad as me catching my daughter makes it sound, but caught my daughter watching a video of a guy reacting to someone else playing a video game. So she's not even like doing the, I would argue, somewhat normal thing of like, hey, I don't want to play the game, but I want to see the story unfold, so I'm going to watch this person play the game. She is watching someone watch someone play a game and watching their reactions to that.
And the best part was that you were watching her watch someone play the game.
I was like, what are you doing?
And if you would just get that camera, Drew, turn that into selfie mode, pop that sucker on TikTok, you could be the next big thing.
My daughter is not allowed on my home Wi-Fi because she uses TikTok, and she's very mad about it.
You better be careful, because that in the future that might be like grounds for like a a civil case that you were depriving, your child of
maybe
the freedom to, rot their brain.
Wait, I didn't get to ask my question earlier. Is there fantasy pickleball?
No, there's not fantasy pickleball yet,
God.
to my knowledge, but I'm guessing there will be soon. Fantasy tennis is not that big. Generally, fantasy sports for solo sports are just like less interesting. So, I mean, fantasy golf is okay. That has a decent size.
No way.
There's fantasy NASCAR as well, but those are the kind of the only big like solo sports.
I thought fantasy NASCAR was called Forza Horizon or Gran Turismo.
The thing that's really going to like make you throw your hands up is that they have fantasy, like you can do fantasy. I mean, you probably won't scoff at like that you can do fantasy esports for like League of Legends or Counter-Strike, but you will probably scoff at the fact that you can do fantasy Madden, where they run a Madden simulation of an NFL game and you can like bet and do fantasy on that as if it was a real game.
Wait. Hold on, explain that way. Hold on. So they're gonna, and this isn't people playing Madden. This is a Madden simulation.
We're in the football off season. These people are degenerates. They need to gamble on football. What can we do? So we can load up a game of Madden, and then we can use the like computer versus computer simulation, and then they just like stream that out so that you know what's happening, and then you can play it as if it was an actual game.
Wow. Okay. I am learning so much about the world of gambling right now. It's
don't worry,
I didn't know any of
this.
Getting
Getting legalized and nothing bad can happen.
Nothing ever bad happens ever. Wow. So wait, okay. Now I feel like no. Sorry, I just had like I'm off my ADHD meds thought of like my brain went down this path of like I wonder if they're ever going to do like fantasy D&D, and then I realized they basically already have that. Like people watch Critical Role and like talk about what's going to happen, like what's the DM going to do next. And I'm like, all right, or okay.
I mean,
cool.
once you can set up like a prediction market for something, then eventually it will turn into like gambling.
Yeah, because we're degenerates, right? Like.
Well, not everyone, but...
I mean, name one person.
Oh, you got me there.
Yeah, see? All right. I bet you that... Let's gamble on this. Show me one person who isn't slightly degenerate in some way, shape, or form.
This can be your next like Rails hackathon project is like fantasy, like Rails, Rails core fantasy, right? You get points for every commit, every merge pull request, I want to get
Tender. I'm going to draft Tenderlove first round. Absolutely.
You'll have to tweak the scoring, if your pull request gets like rejected, then that's kind of like a fumble. If it gets merged, then that's like a field goal. If it gets merged and backported, that's like double bonus points.
Oh yeah. Well, what about co-authored commits? How are we doing those?
Yeah. I don't know. You probably have to work that out.
Well, and you also got to be careful because like Raphael gets a commit every time he merges someone's PR.
Well,
Shohei
Ohtani
he's sort of cheating a little bit.
I mean, he gets Shohei Ohtani gets points for pitching and hitting, so that's just he just built different.
Built different. That reminds me, I got to do one of these random bonus episodes with Andrew Mason. Him and he had his first backpacking experience. We went into the Grand Canyon, and I sort of feel like I need to do one of these random episodes of just picking his brain on like what went through his head as we're climbing out of the Grand Canyon, 3,000 feet of elevation change over 4 miles in like 100-degree heat.
Yeah, you guys probably had some pretty wild podcast topics that you missed out on.
Yeah, probably. I mean, they're in short supply, so you just got to capitalize on whatever you got. All right, well, this was good. We talked about Canadian football, which I did not know was a thing, and I now know is a thing. We talked about hockey, which I love talking about, and you talked about pickleball,
sports betting.
Yep. Sports betting. There's going to be professional pickleball. I think that's it.
We gave someone, the idea for the next hackathon to build fantasy rails.
It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great. Oh man, cool. All right, this was a good bonus episode. 25 minutes. I like it. Unedited. Perfect.
Let her rip.
Yup. All right, stopping for realsies now.